In this presentation, we're going to look at a graph which is very useful in microeconomics called the Production Possibility Frontier, or PPF for short. The PPF is a graph which shows how much of two types of goods an economy can produce. So let's look at these two goods. One set of goods are called consumer goods, which we abbreviate to CON, and the other are capital goods, which we abbreviate to CAP. Consumer goods are things we use up as we consume them. For example, food and clothes are both examples of consumer goods. Capital goods are a different type of goods. They last longer and provide a stream of services for the user. An example of a capital good would be a car, or indeed a house, or a machine used in a factory to make other goods and services. So we say that economies can either produce consumer goods or capital goods with their available factors of production. So let's look at what the PPF curve or graph actually looks like. Here we have two axes with consumer goods on the y-axis and capital goods on the x-axis. So if we draw a PPF, we would draw a curve like this. Every point on this curve represents a combination of capital goods and consumer goods that an economy can make if it uses all its available land, labor, capital, and enterprise. For example, on this point on the PPF, the economy is choosing to use its land, labor, and capital and enterprise to make this many consumer goods and this many capital goods. So, that is what the graph of the PPF is showing us. So what can we illustrate using the PPF? Well, one important idea that we can certainly illustrate is the idea of opportunity cost. We know already that resources are scarce, and so if we decide to move from one point on our PPF to another point on our PPF, we increase the production of one type of good, but in doing so, we have to give up something else. So here, we are moving from point A to point B. In doing so, we are increasing our production of capital goods by this distance here, which we will call distance x. But to do that, we have to use scarce resources to produce more capital goods. And this means we have to give up the production of some consumer goods. So this is the distance y that represents the consumer goods that we have given up. So we can say that this amount of consumer goods that we have given up is the opportunity cost of producing this many extra capital goods. So we can see that the PPF can be very usefully used to illustrate opportunity cost. What else can we show using this very useful diagram? Well, we can also illustrate the idea of efficiency of allocation. If an economy is operating on its PPF, it means that it is using all its available land, labor, capital, and enterprise. In contrast, if an economy is operating inside its PPF, producing this many consumer goods and this many capital goods, it is not being efficient. It is not showing efficiency of allocation, because by using the available factors of production, it could be producing more consumer goods as well as more capital goods. So here, shall we say, at point A, the economy is not being efficient in its allocation of scarce resources, whereas at point B, it is showing efficiency of allocation. So any point on the PPF, such as these points I'm drawing here, show efficiency of allocation, whereas any point inside the PPF is not an efficient allocation of scarce resources. So, finally, let us illustrate the third major concept using the PPF. And this third concept is the concept of long-term economic growth. Long-term economic growth. So let's see what we mean by this. If an economy chooses to use many of its resources to make capital goods such as machines, after a few years the economy will have accumulated a lot of machines, a lot of capital goods. And its ability to produce both capital and consumer goods will be increased because it now has more machinery that it has built up over many years. So, because the economy can now produce more of everything, capital goods and consumer goods, the PPF after a few years will now be here. We say that the PPF has expanded outwards, and this represents long-term economic growth. So, there are many concepts that we can illustrate using the PPF. First of all, we can illustrate the concept of opportunity cost. By moving from point A to point B on the PPF, we suffer an opportunity cost. Although we increase our capital good production, we do this by giving up the consumer goods, and that is the opportunity cost. Another thing that we can illustrate using the PPF is efficiency of allocation. If we are here on our PPF, we are allocating our scarce resources efficiently because we're using them all. But here, we are not allocating scarce resources efficiently. Lastly, we can illustrate long-term economic growth using the PPF. If we accumulate capital equipment, then over many, many years, our productive capacity, the ability of our economy to produce both capital and consumer goods, will increase, and our PPF will expand outwards. So in summary, the PPF is a diagram or graph that shows how much of consumer goods and capital goods an economy can produce if it uses all its factors of production. And the PPF can be used to illustrate three very important microeconomic ideas: opportunity cost, efficiency of allocation, and long-term economic growth.